Propaganda is one of the oldest tools invented by mankind to influence people. From the ancient stories and achievements of Ignatius of Loyola to the modern world of cutting-edge technologies and global networks, propaganda, far from losing its position, but significantly expanded its possibilities of influence. Propaganda has always tried to fill the whole space of human life, in education, medicine, religion, literature, art, and media. Propaganda is found in computer games, comic books, murals, memes, and even in cemeteries. It always appeals to emotions. It always plays with feelings, both on the worthy and the vile. Propaganda continues to be the subject of research by many experts in various fields. A Google search shows about 50,000 publications in Ukrainian and more than 30 million publications in English. However, discussions about understanding this phenomenon often resemble the well-known parable of the blind men and an elephant. And the point is not only that each of the blind men perceived only a part of the whole, and that they could not understand the system only by the parts that belonged to it. The parable of an elephant and the blind men demonstrates the concepts of truth and delusion. Postmodernism did a great service to propaganda because it questioned the concept of truth and turned knowledge into an interpretation of judgments. Jürgen Habermas rightly pointed out that the philosophy of postmodernism led to the collapse of a holistic worldview into independent perceptions of separate groups of experts. Experts mostly mention that propaganda is the deliberate spread of certain ideas, values, norms, and behavioral programs in society, or that it is a systematic form of deliberate persuasion that attempts to influence the emotions, attitudes, opinions, and actions of a specific target audience for political, ideological, or commercial purposes through the supervised transmission of one-sided messages. That propaganda is strong in its systematic nature, as it uses verbal and visual means to build a required vision of the world, and the discussions mainly concern the extent to which propaganda is deceptive, manipulative, open, or hidden. And we can agree with many of the statements. However, just like in the parable of the blind men, this will only be a part of the whole. For many researchers, the challenge of finding effective solutions to counter propaganda is the obvious underestimation of its essence and the specifics of interaction in the information society. The crisis of liberal democracy, the influence of populist ideas and leaders, the devaluation of knowledge and information overload have led to the transformation and increased influence of propaganda, which has already become institutionalized. In the current context, propaganda should be considered through the prism of three global problems of humanity: the crisis of trust as a consequence of the post-truth era, the crisis of expertise in the face of alternative facts, and the crisis of attention as a result of lack of focus. The situation was complicated by the discourse of populism, where propaganda offers simple answers to complex questions. The postmodern approach is one in which everything is questioned and little is taken for granted. There is no right answer, only a narrative. Science has lost its monopoly on truth. The value of truthfulness decreased. Concepts of propaganda and pluralism of opinions have been replaced. Research shows that different audiences have begun to prefer alternative facts and rumors to official information and scientific expertise. The implementation of the idea of alternative facts has already become the basis of Russian policy, and this is already showing results not only in Russian society. This strategy has been used by populist leaders around the world. When people do not want to take responsibility for their lives, that is, refuse to be free, they prefer to be lulled by propaganda delusions. Then the world is perceived through simulacra and understandable narratives. And in this mindset, Statements such as, Ukraine attacked Russia, Russia is only defending its interests, Russians and Ukrainians are one people and have one language, Ukrainians are Nazis, the war is fueled and escalated by those countries that supply weapons to Ukraine, no longer look absurd, because it is known that the sleep of the mind creates monsters. The results of a number of experiments and studies show that the human psyche is not designed to withstand the kind of manipulative pressure that modern propaganda and related PR can produce. Therefore, for many people, disengagement becomes the most convenient way out. Indifference is one of the biggest threats to democracy and freedom of speech. The erosion of democracy began with indifference to what is true. This is where the crisis of trust in the democratic system, demagoguery, disinformation, and alternative news comes from. Propaganda in the past aimed to convince people of the truth and benefits of their ideology and way of life. Modern propaganda, in particular Russian propaganda, tries to prove that there is no truth at all, that everything is not so clear. Doubt has become a convenient way to destroy the set of facts in the minds of the wide public. And then, don't look up becomes a life strategy not only for ordinary citizens, but also for leaders of countries. Thus, Russia is gaining another victory in a small propaganda war. Therefore, we must not forget that without the ability to perceive the reality of things in a cognitive sense, humanity will be increasingly tempted to the opposite attitude to reality, which can be called cognitive escape. Russia has shown that it can easily blur the lines between fact and blatant lies. And as Peter Pomerantsev, a researcher of Russian propaganda, rightly notes, if the truth does not exist, then anything is possible. That is why the Russian-Ukrainian war is not only an existential war for Ukrainians for their existence and freedom. It is a global war for the right to existence of the truth, because a world where there is no truth and no one can be trusted is condemned to destruction and death. When analyzing propaganda, researchers often ask the question of whether a person or humanity as a whole can develop psychological immunity, the ability to withstand threatening information. They discuss what could become a kind of antidote to the influence of propaganda. I am very skeptical about this. The creators of propaganda campaigns are probably aware of the many studies on the functioning of the human psyche, its sensitive points or delusions. And this process cannot be stopped. Moreover, artificial intelligence has joined in. Man is a very plastic creature. His behavior is determined not by reality, but by his perception of that reality. Friedrich Nietzsche called man an indefinite animal. Man combines many open features. This gives him freedom and multiple possibilities, as well as space for contradictory processes. Therefore, in addition to calls for critical thinking and efforts to identify fake news, we need to ask questions about rethinking the foundations of our existence. We should listen to the advice of the French philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, namely, to study in order to be able to do more in order to act more in order to exist more fully. And perhaps, then, we will not perceive propaganda as blind men in the parable about an elephant, but will understand its strength and weakness, and we will look up.
А збагнемо її силу і слабкість, і поглянемо вгору.